name is Charlotte Coogan, and I'm a program specialist with the scaling community. Before we get going on today's session, I just want to give you a little bit of background on the scaling community as a whole. So the SCOP is now in its 11th year, and when it started back in 2015, it was just 50 members, and now it's over 5,000 members. So that just gives you a sense of how much we've been growing. And a lot of that is because there's been growing realization with the need to really start focusing on changing the whole system and the way interventions are designed so that they function at the scale of the problem, at the scale of global problems, and aren't kind of just working one intervention at a time. So everyone is free to join the scaling community. Please go join it on the website. The link should be in the chat if you're not already a member. We do have a few more sessions planned this week for the annual forum, so please check those out and join if you can. The scaling community is a network, so we focus on international development and climate practitioners. Most folks are implementers, but we also have funders and researchers involved. And everyone who's here really wants to learn more about and contribute to the scaling agenda, which for us, like I said before, means achieving sustainable impact that matches the scale of problems that we see today in international development and climate change. So the SCOP has 9 working groups, of which youth employment is one, and that's the session that you're attending today. We also publish a variety of reports on scaling, both knowledge products made by the Secretariat as well as experiences from the members. We have newsletters where we share those, and we regularly organize events, including this annual forum. So the forum is a 2-week event that this year marks a significant milestone for us because we are launching our scaling campaign for 2026 to 2030. That campaign is really meant to be a collective effort to strengthen the system standards and partnerships that are needed to achieve transformational scale, working across the development and climate ecosystems. In each of the working group sessions, we're reflecting on how scaling works within that working group. So youth, there's a nutrition group, there's a climate group. And we're talking about how those working groups are contributing to the overall goals of the scaling community of practice and the scaling campaign. The last session is going to be on Friday, March 6th, and we really encourage you to attend that session where we're going to be summarizing all of the main take-homes from across the forum, and we're also going to issue our call to action to support the scaling campaign. Briefly, just a few topics for today's session. Please use the chat function to the extent that you can. Share where you're coming from, what your reflections are, as well as any questions. So this doesn't just have to be a sort of questions at the end, but as things are being said, please feel free to put reactions in to the extent that they can. Our panelists will be replying as they go, but also we can have the Q&A at the end to aggregate those. This session is going to be recorded. We hope that you will share these recordings once they're uploaded online, specifically with your Francophone and Spanish-speaking colleagues, because they will be translated, but also just share with your broader community. And we look forward to today's session. So I think that means it's over to Liz now.
Thank you. My name is Liz Vance. I'm one of the co-chairs of our Youth Employment Working Group. And today we're going to talk about service learning. Before I begin, I would love to reiterate Charlotte's request to please put in where you're calling in from today. I'd love to know a little bit more about who I'm speaking with. So I want to talk, and I know that we're all up in the Western Hemisphere here on your panel today. We have Miguel joining us from Parral, Chihuahua, and David joining us from Oakland, California. I'm from unincorporated Gilpin County in Colorado. So we are excited to meet people from this hemisphere. Outside, we have someone from over a 26-hour plane flight away from me now. This is wonderful to get to see where everyone's coming in from. So today we're going to talk about service learning, which is one of the few youth development approaches that scales quickly, low cost, high visibility, and easy to embed in school. But scale without rigor doesn't deliver impact. When structure, reflection, and community relevance are present, service learning becomes a vehicle for youth agency, youth power, social cohesion, and sometimes employability. And today we're going to explore how with two of the people I've admired most in all my years working in this field. I started working in youth development when I was a youth, and I'm so pleased to bring today the two people that I have found most inspiring in this field. Um, I'm going to introduce David first and invite him to come off mute and join me on the big screen. David Kakashiba is Executive Director of the East Bay Asian Youth Center, an organization born in the late 1970s out of a grassroots youth initiative in Berkeley to create a culturally affirming space and support system for Asian American young people. David has led EBASI's community-rooted youth development and school partnership work for over 4 decades. He served on the Oakland Unified School District Board for 12 years, several of those as president, and helped advance Measure N, a 2014 Oakland parcel tax that provides dedicated funding for college and career readiness and work-based learning in city high schools. Measure N generates local revenue to expand real-world learning opportunities and support services that prepare students for post-secondary success. David brings deep insight into both how service learning can cultivate agency, rebuild trust, and build employability skills. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I wanted to ask a few questions, and the first one is really around what you feel like distinguishes real service learning, where youth feel agency and ownership from symbolic volunteer hours.
It's well. I think the biggest thing is that the work project, the research question, whatever the young people are working on, is pretty genuinely it matters to them what they're working on. They just have to sign up for putting in some hours. Folks are going to look for kind of the easiest kind of thing to do. But a real service learning process would be born out of actually listening to the young people themselves and being able to engage their interest, engage their anger, their pain, and their aspiration. And so to the extent that it matters to them, they're going to be involved, throughout the whole process.
Thank you. So I feel like that leads me to the second piece, which is you started talking about first you have to listen to them to understand what they're interested in is the start, and what the pain points are. And I feel like we all know that when we talk about a shared frustration, it can really create trust and community. At the same time, we're often asking people to do service learning at institutions that they might not implicitly trust. And so I guess my question here is how can service learning strengthen trust between young people and public institutions? And what are the barriers and pitfalls for when it doesn't?
Mm. Well, what the potential is that uh, I mean, service learning is a learning process. It's not really a destination, and so to the extent that that learning experience is a supportive, kind of high quality, challenging experience for the young person that is supported by the kind of teaching adult or the uh, facilitating adult is uh, is pretty important. Now, time, place, and conditions, I think impact the ability of what that experience is going to be like. And so, my direct experience has been more in non-institutional, non-governmental kind of community-based settings where the environment is one that we have more control over. Um, my wife, for example, is a teacher at Oakland High School in the Public Health Academy. And so when they are doing their senior projects and other kind of what they would call it work-based learning, but essentially much of it is sort of a service learning kind of method. They're constrained. They are having to do it during the school day. Students got other courses that they have to go to, other periods, other class periods they have to go to, and so you just have to make the best out of that, and most importantly, the adults have to deliver, and they have to know what they're doing. Um, um, the adults need to have already thought about, like, if they were a student and they were in that project, what would be sort of the beginning, middle, and end, and does that adult or adults have the information, the relationships, the kind of being able to give warm handoffs to young people to interview or meet with people in the community to advance their project. So to that extent, it's like anything else. You give a good product, then you're going to deliver trust or develop trust. You give a crappy product, then you can get crap.
Thanks. So I heard a few things there that I want to call out. One is some things that you called out as critical and as for a quality product. Service learning piece, not only responding to young people's interests and pain points, but also having adults that have the right information, the right relationships, and also a service learning component needs to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It can't just be a sort of endless piece. Could you speak a little bit to how those quality elements, particularly the beginning, middle, and end, might tie to what are these skills or competencies, or what are the value adds that a young person gets out of a quality service learning opportunity?
Well, depending on where this is taking place and who's doing it. I mean, I think, in schools, there are different standards that I think teachers are aspiring to, that would kind of indicate or demonstrate quality, competency, knowledge acquisition, what have you. I don't know if, my experience more in the community setting is more like it's kind of a little less about that. It's more about like that young people come away and say, I did that.
Mm-hmm.
I did that, and I end up having a belief that if young people work together, they can make an impact. And that's, I mean, you can certainly collect that through surveys and interviews, but that doesn't get you into college, or doesn't give you a job necessarily. Those are not the skills and attributes. But I think ultimately that's the impact, that if you're doing something around a social, environmental, whatever kind of issue that young people are working on, the kind of ideal outcome is that they can say, I did this, and name what it is that they did. It's material, it's concrete, and they can say the kind of change that occurred, and they come away with a belief that um, that you can make change, um, uh, through that experience, and that's something hopefully that they take um, that kind of belief or that attitude you know into their adulthood.
That's huge. So I'm hearing that there's sort of, and I know I sent you questions ahead of time, but your answers have led me in other directions. um, I'm hearing that in your mind, it seems like there are sort of two buckets of service learning. One is outside of the institutional setting where it really responds to and builds on young people's interests, their pain points, what their concerns are, and they're able to look back and see, I changed this, I made this impact, I saw a problem, and maybe it's not completely solved, but I did something. I made the world better in an important way. And there's an institutional context that may have additional constraints, but also has different outcomes where the outcome is really around building competencies that a college might recognize or employer might recognize. Does
Yeah.
that sound like I'm understanding you correctly?
Yeah. I mean, they're not opposite or in opposition. They're I would say the school setting that's uh, uh, kind of those skill sets are important to acquire. I think in the school setting that they are building the skills and the attitudes uh, with young people that are kind of real world. It's
Yep.
like, you know, you can ace your geometry, and yes, it will have some relevance as they're getting older, but being able to critically analyze, research, communicate, work together, collaborate, and work towards a final product. Those are um, skills and approaches that one is going to apply lifelong. And I think that there are some schools and schools within schools that are emphasize that.
So it sounds like I'm going to paraphrase and then ask, I guess, my second to last question. But it sounds like what I'm hearing from both experiences is that, in the institutional setting, it's helping young people take what they've learned in the classroom in an academic setting and apply it with critical thinking, effective teamwork to really not just apply it, but make something.
Sure.
And that sounds like a really effective service learning opportunity in the classroom.
Yeah.
Would would you see if we wanted that to be the norm and not the exception of in this school within this school, what would you see are the structural elements that school districts or education institutions around the world might want to consider so service learning strengthens both the cohesion style and the cohesion goals around young people feeling like if there's a problem in the world, I can change it, but also that career readiness at scale?
Well, you're talking about a revolution.
I am. This is
This,
my end goal, David. You've known me forever.
I think in at least in secondary education, high schools, that um, schools and school districts, um, have to have a core professional belief and value system around this.
Mhm.
Uh, that um, teaching uh, teaching for skills is definitely one thing, and teaching for content is another. But teaching to practice is something that is you know, I don't think high school teachers are trained to do that. And so I think there is something about building a sort of some real professional capital around uh, valuing this approach to secondary education. And then from there, it's about, uh, I mean, I think educators have a lot of different ideas about it, but there's something that you have to take a look at, how school is structured and organized in terms of time, uh, and coursework, and like in California, I imagine throughout the United States is the course credits and graduation requirements and what have you. And something like doing a service learning based senior capstone project. It's not a graduation requirement, I think, in most school districts. If any school districts that I know in California, I'm not aware of it. Um, and so I just, there are those kind of little things that kind of begin to express a shift in how we do high schools. Um, and Oakland has been trying to make that shift, but you know, uh, on a very systemic basis. But it's still a real challenge.
Yeah. So I am cognizant and looking at the folks that are here on this call. I'm seeing people from South Africa and people from Mexico. And I know that in both countries, they have competency-based technical high schools, um, which seems like a step away from what you just described, which is application-based. And I'm I'm a big education nerd. I try to hide it, but it's true. And I was thinking of Bloom's taxonomy of skills and how, when you first learn something, it's like, I heard of that once. That's sort of the baseline. And then at the very top, it's like, not only can I apply this skill, but I can think critically about it, which is a term that you used when you were describing really good service learning. And I feel like I've spent my life trying to help competency-based education systems move to developing that critical thinking and that evaluative capacity. And what I really appreciated in your answer was you talked about the incentives that direct schools towards what? It's not just defining, are we based on competencies? Are we building knowledge? Or are we helping people apply it? You talked a lot about, well, what happens next? How do we know that the school is successful if they're not getting academic credit, they're not able to transfer these skills, or it's not recognized, or it's not a graduation requirement? And those seem to me to be some really big levers if one wanted to make this change. It might not change how much time you spend in class. Maybe you're still in the same class, but it's focused on how do we solve a problem. If you were thinking about what those levers are, beyond, because you mentioned some graduation requirements, what universities might recognize, are there other levers we should think through around how you shift from being a competency-based education system to one that's focused more on application and critical thinking?
Well, so in a very kind of immediate kind of thing, and again, my experience is very limited to the local school district here in Oakland. Uh, but I think what I was talking about is uh, reforming our systems in this
Yeah.
case on a citywide level, and then there are systems within school sites and systems within academic departments. And so the systems change there that we've been undergoing in Oakland for the last 10, 12 years has been that this, what they call a linked learning approach, to high school education and the development of uh, career pathways and cohorting students and teachers across 3 grade levels and in integrating career technical education and and the core academic subject, the contextualizing the content of those core academic subjects. All of that kind of stuff has been um, something. First of all, there is sort of a statewide recognition in California that this is kind of a recognized field. I wouldn't say it's dominant, but it is definitely recognized in education circles locally and statewide, and there's some grant funding for it at the state level. And what we have done locally is we have incentivized it by taxing ourselves. So we have a very modest $12 million tax that is dedicated to high schools only. 90% of all that revenue goes to high schools themselves. High schools must, it is sort of a top down idea about this linked learning model, um, but it requires a bottom up embrace of that model and an adaptation of that model to the concrete conditions in their school. Um, in other words, and so, what happens is that when something like a tax or state funding comes in, everybody has their hand out and they just say, give me the money, cut me the check, shut up, get out of my way. And this one was different. We said, you have the money, but you have to demonstrate that you have a real plan to implement this career pathway model in your school. Whether you have 300 students in your school, you have 3,000 students in your school. You have to figure that out, and it has to be publicly presented, and has to be publicly approved, and you have kind of annual kind of accountability measures there, and there are standards for it in terms of the implementation, and so that probably has been the greatest incentive in Oakland to move schools towards that direction. Again, some schools do it better than others, but on a citywide level, that's been key. Now, I'll just say one last thing. That's probably too, like, maybe not terribly relevant, but Oakland schools as a whole, students who go, we've got 3 out of 4 students that are multiple grade levels below in their kind of core reading, mathematics, science. They are really, quote unquote, underperforming academically. And so by time you come into high school in the 9th grade as a 14-year-old, most of those students are not prepared for high school level academics. So there's a tug of war that goes on in the district and in our schools about whether teachers should be teaching basic skills, but high school teachers really want to teach us content, or you do this application, skills and content, and you're applying it to real world kind of challenges. So you always have that, and I just raise that because I would say that's not a barrier, but it's something that you have to factor in.
No, I think that's a huge point. I feel like sometimes it's presented as a dichotomy and sometimes it seems like a false dichotomy. I've never seen when the context that Miguel is coming from, and I'm so excited. I love your t-shirt with the Japanese and Mexican flags. But in Miguel's context, and he'll be joining us soon, I think 40% of the young people fail high school classes. And when you ask them why they drop out, it wasn't because they failed, it was because they didn't see a link between what they're studying now and what the career is. So I'm excited for you guys to start talking at the end. I'm going to switch to Miguel now. Um, Thank you so much, David. I learn every time I talk to you. So Miguel is here as country director for IYF in Mexico with over 20 years of leadership across Mexico's major public education systems. Miguel previously held senior roles in CONALEP, which is the country's largest technical vocational network, serving hundreds of campuses nationwide, and in the Colegio de Bachilleres, or COBACH, which is one of Mexico's principal state-run upper secondary systems focused on academic preparation. This combined experience gives him an exceptional grasp of how national and state subsystems function, scale, and maintain quality in complex contexts. Miguel is one of the most capable public administrators working in Mexico today. He combines operational rigor, equity-centered leadership, and fluency in navigating highly complex political and institutional environments. He is known for designing and implementing large-scale, high-integrity initiatives rooted in their local context. I think my favorite one was an innovative Lucha Libre-inspired recruitment campaign. For those of us who don't know what Lucha Libre is, on this call, I encourage you to take a moment and Google it. It's awesome, masked Mexican wrestling. This recruitment campaign encouraged young men to choose the path of the técnico, which in Lucha Libre, there's two teams, the técnicos and the rudos, which is skilled, disciplined protagonists over the rudo, a metaphor used to counter the cartel narratives and redirect young people towards technical careers with dignity and purpose. Across all of his roles, Miguel brings rare systems perspectives on how to scale service learning rapidly without compromising rigor, guided reflection, or community relevance, ensuring quality and consistency across thousands of schools and multiple governance levels. So, Miguel, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for the invitation and for all the attendees. Hope this couple of minutes brings value to this great forum.
So, Miguel, from a systems lens, why is service learning one of the few youth development approaches governments can scale quickly and cost effectively?
When we talk about scaling service learning across countries and contexts, the key question is the institutional feasibility. Service learning scale because it does not require building a parallel delivery system. It's embedded in schools. It operates inside existing local authorities, ways of doing things, community actors, public agencies. Public system scale what aligns with their mandates, incentives, and accountability structures. When reform fits within institutional architecture, expansion becomes feasible. When it requires institutions to behave in an entirely new way, scale slows down. For example, Liz, if I may, in Mexico, when service learning was aligned with existing coordination between upper secondary subsystems and municipal agencies, expansion did not require new legislation or large new budgets. What it required was clarifying institution roles and embedding the model into agreements that already existed. The lessons was not about Mexico, it was about alignment. When alignment exists, scales accelerates.
Thanks, Miguel. So what I'm hearing here is that when you're thinking as a public administrator, if you have existing relationships, existing MOUs, existing coordination fora, adding a new topic is not nearly as difficult as a whole new relationship. And this is why in many countries, service learning is a graduation requirement. It is operated at the scale of millions. Now I have a harder question for you. What essential elements do you see that separate meaningful service learning from superficial activities? And are those as easy to scale?
Yeah, scale without rigor produces activity, not impact. Three elements are non-negotiable. Clarity of roles. This is very important. Who does what and when. A structured reflection and community relevance. I was hearing right now David in his chat with you related of relevance. What the meaning of what I'm doing? It's adding value to my present and will add value to the future. Not only speaking about the students, about youth, but of all the persons that are involved in implementing this kind of strategies. However, these elements only function when institutional architecture exists. So you mentioned it, clear agreements, defined expectations, safety consideration, accountability lines. So that builds that network and strengthens the path to scalability.
So I'm hearing here a lot about the infrastructure that needs to undergird all of this, that you can't start talking about quality if you don't, for example, know who's covering the liability insurance. That makes, can I ask a little bit about the burden of this? So this is, I understand that in the Mexican context, asking a teacher to administer a service learning program might not be realistic. But also there's administrative burden. I wanted to know how can, if it's the social development ministry or another, how could they approach schools to embed service learning into an academic pathway or a vocational pathway without adding burden to teachers or overextended administrative tasks?
That's key, Liz, and thank you for bringing this up. Wherever we work with a school, there's a teacher, right? And there's a universal operational reality. Teachers are stretched. Teachers are doing more than what we are expected them to do. So if service learning depends on individual teacher heroics, it will not scale. Sustainable models separate roles clearly. I was mentioning this in the last question. Pedagogical leadership belongs to teachers. That's a must. Operational coordination belongs to administrators or designated coordinators. This protects the educator, the teacher's bandwidth. It protects continuity and it protects quality. Sustainable scale requires designing with human capacity in mind, not only thinking that teachers can do everything. They are an important element, but not necessarily they are the ones responsible to manage this conversation. Many reforms fail not because of weak ideas, but because of role confusion. When expectations are unclear, burnout follows. Protecting educators' energy is not peripheral; it's central on these additional tasks that reinforce education in classrooms. So we need to be clear on roles. And yes, when there are several stakeholders, you need to be sure that everybody's thinking loud and clear, but not only thinking that teacher will develop this in the classroom, but there are responsibilities outside the classroom that need to connect this value to students.
So I want to talk a little bit about one of those really important responsibilities outside the classroom, which is when you're thinking at the scale of thousands, what works to ensure that projects actually respond to real community needs? It's not just a generic task. Like David was saying, if you have a graduation requirement, I'm just going to choose the easiest one.
Yeah. It's not an easy answer, right? Relevance looks different across countries. It may connect to environment resilience, food security, public health, or civic participation. The principal constant, I believe, is service learning must connect young people to real community priorities, making them know they're doing something that will change their reality. When students see their work aligned with something civic, trust begins to form. That is where service learning becomes more pedagogic. It becomes a mechanism for strengthening the social contract. In societies, experiencing polarization or mistrust, this is especially powerful. Young people do not rebuild trust through theory; they rebuild trust through participation. Structured participation in public problem solving gradually reshapes institutional perception.
Could you talk a little bit more about what that looks like, what quality looks like at scale? Like, how do you, I feel like that was amazing. If that lived all the
Yeah.
time naturally, we would live in utopia and we could all go home on time and none of us would ever work late. But I feel like there's a lot of incentives tending towards not, when you get a young person in the office and you're like, what are you going to do? Make the photocopies. There's the copy machine, like learn how to work it. That might not give a young person a sense that they're solving some of the most important problems. So when you're thinking about fidelity at scale, like the vision that you outlined was incredibly inspiring. So when you're thinking at the scale of thousands of schools, not just thousands of young people, what governance or quality assurance mechanisms work? How can you really do this? And what doesn't?
Governance at scale should not only control specifically every project, it should safeguard essential ingredients. A shared definition of quality is a must. Consistent reflection on frameworks with all the players being responsible. Light touch monitoring. You don't need to be micromanaging all of these agreements or institutions, but you need to be sure that you're measuring transversal indicators. Training for coordinators, that's elemental. The goal, if you see, if I'm like being clear, the goal is not uniformity. The goal is coherence. So coherence allows diversity while preserving rigor. Measuring is critical. System scale, you need to learn and design measure. If service learning is to remain embedded, it must generate credible signals of competency development, like collaboration. You mentioned right now problem solving, civic reasoning, transferable skills. Integrating these into existing accountability systems strengthens legitimacy. Legitimidad. Sorry if I said
no, that's perfect. Legitimacy.
It was legitimacy. Yeah.
Okay, so then here's my last question. If you were advising a ministry on a national rollout of service learning, what's the biggest pitfall to avoid? Conversely, is there an opportunity that they just can't miss?
Thank you, Liz. The biggest pitfall is reducing service learning to symbolic volunteer hours, right? When disconnected from institution, it becomes episodic. So you fragment it, so it won't add value. When unsupported by structure, it collapses. The opportunity is strategic. Service learning can act as a bridge between youth and institutions, between education and employability, and between civic responsibility and personal agency. In a global moment defined by fragmentation and mistrust, approaches that reinforce the relationship between young people and public systems are not peripheral, they are foundational. We often ask, how to prepare young people for the future of work. Perhaps the better question would be, how do we prepare institutions for the future of youth? Service learning, when structurally embedded, strengthens both. And the dual strengthening, youth capacity and institutional credibility, is what makes it not just scalable, but strategic. That would be my advice.
Thank you, Miguel. I'd love to invite David back to the chat. I have some questions I'd love to ask both of you, but I wanted to know, David or Miguel, having listened to each other, do you have any questions for Miguel? David, do you have any questions for Miguel or Miguel for David?
No, not right off the top, no.
Okay, I do have a question. Both of you guys spoke about systems level levers, and I was surprised given how different your backgrounds are. I feel like when I think about that, they ended up being so similar. You guys both spoke about the importance of incentives, the importance of building out the sort of big lines, but then making sure that it's locally adapted, and that was a really critical piece. I also heard from both of you, and it wasn't as explicit, was this piece around local relevance for a school to be able to decide, okay, I'm responding to this incentive, this is how I'm going to develop this, but also relevance to the young person. And Miguel, you referenced the relevance part as like, oh, well, it can't just be a tick box and it needs to respond to societal needs. I guess what I wanted to hear from you both is thoughts on how to make that operational and scalable. Because I imagine, Miguel, if you were like, I'm going to sign a MOU between the Secretary of Health and the Secretary of Education, that it would be very difficult to have that MOU be based on individual young people saying, I really am interested in this health issue. How can we square that circle? What's that link between if we want to make it relevant and we want to have these sort of incentives that make it possible for everyone? How can we also make it relevant for everyone? And that was sort of the tension that I kept coming back to.
When you say relevant, you're talking about relevance to the young person or people, young?
I'm talking about relevance to the young person, relevance and to the school community, and relevance to that particular community or neighborhood. Like when I think about, I've seen some amazing service learning in Mexico that is responding to a public health need in a town, which can be amazing. But I've also seen a lot that are like, you're making photocopies in the coffee machine, which I am so grateful that I learned how to work a copy machine. However, it didn't make me feel like I was making a big change in my life.
So, go ahead, David. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think for young people, I mean, you are, I just give the example of in school in the Public Health Academy at Oakland High, there are a range of topics, right? Kind of health issues. But how do you apply a public health approach to it versus a medical approach to it? And so, so in that context, I think there's a lot of interest among a lot of different young people about what to work on. Now, in terms of it being relevant to, say, the group of people or a neighborhood or a community, I think that's, I mean, in certain settings and certain situations, that can definitely happen. And I've seen that happen. I don't know if you could do that for every single project.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's sort of, you want to have high expectations, but at the same time, you want to be mindful about, um, you know, what you can realistically kind of achieve. So
Sort of
uh,
like setting the guardrails, an aspiration, and then almost like a floor.
yeah, yeah, and any given issue, you could, the scope and scale of what that project could be is just enormous. So you also have to, help scaffold that for the young person or a group of young people.
And I believe Miguel spoke to that, and in terms of the pedagogical role of the
Yes.
teacher, like, if you have a arrangement with a Ministry of Social Development or whomever, could you expand a little bit on that and sort of speaking to David's point around scaffolding, like particularly young people, there's a expression, David, in Mexican Spanish, which is "I'm going to eat the world," which is, it's very hard when you're a young person to not feel like I'm going to change world hunger
Everything.
everywhere, and
Mhm.
that might not be setting them up for making an impact that they can see. Miguel,
Yeah.
could you speak a little
Yes.
to that?
Yes, and taking it back, taking your past question, just you need to be you need to make this relevant for all the players, right? The student is in the center, of course, but it needs to be relevant for all the involved players, right? The school, the Ministry of Health, or the local authority. Relevant for institutions begins with alignment to their mandates. I was speaking about this in my first answer. Every public agency, whether local, regional, or national, already operates under defined objectives, performance indicators, and accountability pressures, right? The connector is not uh, to project itself. It's a mandate. So operationally, you start by in past experiences, we start mapping institutional priorities, uh, environmental targets, public health goals, workforce development plans, civic engagement strategies. Then you design service learning projects that contribute uh, even modestly to those existing objectives. When institutions see that youth participation helps advance their KPIs or strategy. Sorry, my dogs suddenly are. Are you hearing?
No,
No. Okay.
we
Okay.
can't hear
Okay.
them.
Okay. Okay. Uh, they always do this at this time. Or strategic plans. Engagement of those players starts to build value, and in the center is the student. So if all those connectors or those bridges starts to have clear communication, there's a shared value. Youth gain competencies and agency, and institutions advance in their measurable goals. So alignment of incentives is what makes collaboration durable and not just only goodwill.
I feel like that makes all the sense in the world, really making sure that this is real alignment. This is not just, oh, we'd love to have kids because we like kids. I wanted to recognize Julie Howard had a question, which is, David and Miguel, could you reflect on a specific service learning example that was particularly memorable for its effect on students, communities, schools? Maybe even an experience that changed the way the schools viewed and organized service learning afterwards. David, I'll turn it to you first because I'm cognizant of the time and I don't want to keep you longer.
So I don't have an example really about a project within school. I mean, I do know of projects, but I wasn't really I wasn't involved in it. I'd say that the two projects, and they kind of are separated by about almost 30 years. Uh, One was in the mid 90s, 1990s in Oakland, and in engaging a multiracial group of young people here in Oakland who, all of whom are impacted by gun violence in Oakland. And the issue was, what the hell's going on with the gun violence with young people, and what can be done about it? And those young people felt that one of the biggest things was that there was nothing to do for no meaningful learning experiences for young people. There were no jobs, recreation centers were cut back. At that time, there were no after-school programs at all in any school. And that there was a sense that adults were afraid of them. And so in kind of researching about what we could do about expanding what was essentially expanding youth development opportunities for young people, they came up with this thing about, let's force the city of Oakland to put in to dedicate a certain amount of their budget to youth development programming. And we researched that and learned from something in San Francisco, and that turned into a ballot initiative that went to the voters in 1996, and it overwhelmingly passed, like close to 80% of the vote. And that was in 1996. Today, it's about $21 million a year, and helped to kind of leverage a lot of other funding over the years. And we did something similar to that in Sacramento. And in 2022, a ballot measure where we set aside a certain amount, because Sacramento does a lot of marijuana stuff and collects a lot of taxes, and the taxes just go to law enforcement. And so there was a ballot measure to take 40% of that tax revenue into youth development, health and safety programs for young people, and that passed.
Wow, that's amazing, David. I am really inspired by how. Go ahead.
And just say though, sometimes when you take it to that kind of scale, you do see a lot of crap from adults.
Yeah.
And sometimes that could really turn off young people too.
Mm-hmm.
It could inspire them to be fighters and, fighting for justice lifelong, and other people, they could just say, forget it.
I feel like that's like one of the big challenges working in youth development, particularly when you're working with young people that have a lot of cards stacked against them. Like when you're a young person is when you're trying to figure out how the world works. And if the conclusion again and again and again is that like the cards are stacked against me, no one wants me to succeed, it's really hard, because in some cases they're not wrong. And for some people, they're like, I'm going to fight against it. I don't know if I would have had the wherewithal and the chutzpah to do that. I feel like that's a really hard challenge. I'd love to hear from folks on this call, or Miguel, what you've thought about when you're confronting that, or if you'd like to respond to Julie's question about when you're thinking of a really powerful service learning piece.
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing, David. And yeah, just coming back to the question of Julie, I was thinking around some specific example of a specific school. Liz mentioned early in this call a name of a technical vocational public system in Mexico called, the name is CONALEP, right? So in one campus, when I was working there, in one campus, students from the industrial maintenance and electromechanical career, they partnered with the municipal water authority. The municipality was facing recurring issues with small pumping station and preventing maintenance in low-income neighborhood. So dealing with bad quality water or having no water at homes, it's really a problem in Mexico. Instead of treating this as volunteer repair works, the project was structured and applied as a technical learning. Students connected, supervised diagnostics, mapped recurring failures, and developed a preventive maintenance proposal plan aligned with what they were studying and aligned with the priorities of the municipal water authority. So coming back again to, they were adding value to metrics and obligations of the municipal water authority, but they were to transforming their neighborhood, and they were doing practices. What changed the school perspective was the level of responsibility and visibility. Students presented their findings directly to municipal engineers and school leadership. After that experience, the campus reorganized service learning into formal technical modules. Partnerships with public agencies were formalized through agreements. Reflection was embedded into the coursework, and projects were scheduled as part of the competency assessment. It shifted from community service to applied professional training with public impact. And that shifted, changed how both students and the institution understood the role in the community. They were, if you see in this example, everybody had their own objective, but was a common one that connected again, and in the center was the student, then the center was youth.
And that's really powerful. I would like to just give a little bit further context. For much of the mid 20th centuries and into the 1970s and 1980s, poor water was the leading cause of death among children in Mexico. This was incredibly impactful. You could imagine the older brothers and sisters of these students having suffered through that. I see a question here from Sarah Pai, and then I know that not all of us can stay on too much longer, so I want to be respectful of time. But Sarah Pai is doing research on youth-led water management systems in semi-arid region in South Africa. Miguel, would you be willing to reach out to her? Excellent. And then Julie.
Yes, of course. Yes, I'm copying your email. At the end, I will reach to you.
Excellent. Any further questions before we let David and Miguel return to their incredibly impactful work? David, do you have any final closing thoughts, or Miguel?
Thank you for the opportunity to present and discuss with you. Yeah, it's a really engaging conversation, so thank you.
Miguel, any thoughts before I close?
Very excited. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be part of this group. Thank you for this thoughtful conversation. There is one idea I would leave us with this today. Service learning is not powerful because it adds more activity to schools. It's powerful because it reconnects learning to public purpose. So happy to continue this conversation and be part of this community. Grateful with you, Liz, and thank you, David. Great meeting you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. My closing reflection is really just this, that I think David really nailed it, which is how can we create avenues for young people to respond to what is already on their mind and allowing them to be able to feel like they're able to make a change. And sometimes that work is really hard. because it exposes young people to just how hard this work is. And I think that when I talk to David and Miguel here and the teams of people that they work with, the care that they give towards young people to help them process what they learn and come away from it stronger and feeling like they have a place in society is really something that has inspired me for decades. So thank you all for your participation. And otherwise, I think we will call it a close. So thank you. Thanks, everyone.